Glad you could join us for this live stream from the Weather Network. My name is Kim McDonald. We have two areas of concern right now. We are talking about tornado warnings in Manitoba. And there is one cell that is particularly close to Winnipeg. Winnipeg, you're safe right now. It's north and east of you, but it's close. So our tornado warnings for Manitoba include the rural municipalities of Broken Head, including Beausejour, Garson, Springfield, including Enola, and Birds Hill Provincial Park. So those are the newest areas added to the tornado warning. St. Andrews, including Selkirk, Lockport, Ponema is in there, St. Clements, including Grand Beach, Broken Head, and Libau, excuse me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. And then we've got the rural municipality of East St. Paul, and including Birds Hill. So all of these areas in pink on the map are under a tornado warning. Anywhere around this area in brown is a tornado watch. So a warning means that it could be producing a tornado, these severe thunderstorms, some of them rotating, obviously. Two ways we can tell if there's a tornado or a reason to issue a tornado warning. One, via looking at the radar. The other is a storm spotter. We'll see a tornado on the ground. And Environment and Climate Change Canada responsible for issuing tornado watches and warnings. Otherwise, in the yellow, we're just looking at severe thunderstorm watches right now. I'm going to go to meteorologist Melinda Singh, who's been looking at these. This is not the only place in the country that's seeing severe weather, but certainly the most severe when we're talking about actual tornado warnings currently.
Yes, currently, Kim. Let's take a look at the radar, actually, where we're looking at multiple supercell-like structures. Here is this one that is just northeast of Winnipeg that Kim was mentioning. So if I just quickly zoom in here on the screen, you can see this area in pink here, so indicating heavy amounts of rainfall and quite a bit of large hail associated with this, and this is tornado warned, so it could be producing a little bit of rotation. We are seeing that on radar, so if you are in this area, of course, like Kim mentioned, please head indoors, keep you and your family safe. There are a few other ones that we're also tracking as well. These ones are in the Inner Lake region, now actually moving over the lakes, but you can still see how pronounced these storms are, and they're producing quite a bit of heavy rainfall, and that will continue as they track eastward and making its way east of the lake. So we're not only tracking storms across Manitoba, like Kim mentioned, we've been tracking storms across southern Ontario. I'll just play this for you. This is a line of storms that started around that 3-4 o'clock hour. It did start to make its way in through areas like Windsor, Sarnia, and it's currently making its way in with heavy rainfall for areas like Grand Bend, Goderich, Kincardine, in through the Georgian Bay region as well. Kitchener, you're seeing so it's more widespread rain as of right now. All these areas are under severe thunderstorm watches. There are no warnings in effect currently, but now we're seeing more of that heavier rainfall pushing in for areas like Dunnville, Caledonia, Beamsville, and Hamilton as well, in through areas of Niagara Falls. And we're also looking at a secondary line pushing in behind it. It's not really a line, it's more so a system cluster of storms, also known as a MCS in meteorological terms. And that is actually what's producing quite a bit of damaging winds across the region. So a bit of bowing out segment, meaning some strong line winds, and this is actually going to be very shortly tracking in through areas of southwestern Ontario and then potentially making its way in across central regions of Ontario. So two lines of storms that we're tracking here impacting southern Ontario. Heavy downpours are definitely one of the main concerns, and of course the damaging winds, and we did see some Twitter photos and videos, Kim, on a bit of those damaged trees and down power lines.
Yeah, this was that first line of storms that rolled through, and it's a good reminder at how powerful these winds can be. Certainly if there's a tornado warning, but even straight line winds can cause all kinds of damage. This was tweeted out of Kingsville, Ontario, southwestern Ontario. Steve Lanson showing us the damage there. We can see trees not only down, but split as well. So we've got that concern. And then here, another tree in Kingsville. John Freeman tweeting this out, tree damage caused by the strong winds. So this is a squall line. This is what we've been looking at. And again, that's a narrow band of convective storms. So a line of thunderstorms moving across the province. Windsor at one point saw 87 kilometers per hour. Now, these are not all the stations, obviously, but not only were the winds powerful, so 87 kilometers, and that means light structural damage, 88 plus trees uprooted. So in the areas we were looking at in Kingsville, likely higher than 87 kilometers per hour. And again, it's moving into this hot, humid air mass. Temperatures dropped immediately behind that first storm. London down to 20, 22 in Windsor. Temperatures east, high 20s. So this is what's been going on in Ontario with another round on the way. But Manitoba, real concern for that province. There are two big supercells northeast of Winnipeg as we speak. One of the areas that has just been added to the tornado warning in Manitoba is Jackhead Reserve. So that's back in the warning. I know you were in the tornado warning earlier, and now you're back in it again. So again, Manitoba, widespread tornado warnings as we speak. We'll go back to Manitoba now with Melinda Singh.
Around with the radars here, just trying to get a good glance at the velocities, which we look at to see the potential for rotation. But yes, I will make its way back into Manitoba, where we're continuing to look at these cells that are impacting the region. You can see quite a bit of cloud cover on this cell that's just northeast of Manitoba, and it was still producing quite a bit of heavy rainfall. Potential for large hail is in there as well, and there's still tornado warned across the region, and we're also still tracking the threat to see rotation with these storms. There's quite a big cluster, and there is radar. The radar is indicating on the side here that I'm looking at that there is the potential for a tornado within that cell. And as we head northward in the Inner Lake region, Little Bullhead and areas just north of there, there's two other cells of note, and these cells are producing quite a bit of heavy rainfall, large hail as well, but not as pronounced as the other cell we're looking at, and of course strong wind gusts. So we're continuing to see these storms across the region because it's quite a volatile atmosphere. You're getting that wind shear. That's actually what's helping to produce the rotation leading to tornadoes. So supercell-like structures that are continuing in across the region that we've highlighted here in red on your screen. Strong winds, very large hail. So we've been forecasting for heavy rainfall and the potential for tornadoes as well. So this will continue into the next couple of hours. All the ingredients are definitely in place, but once again, here's a look at the current tornado warnings across the region here. And as I expected here, it did extend southward, so impacting areas just east of the city of Winnipeg. So we are going to continue to track these. Kim has more on where exactly are good places to hide when you are in a tornado warning.
Yeah, and I saw these questions on Twitter earlier today. When is it time to go into a basement? Well, certainly if there's a tornado warning, and anytime you don't feel safe, perhaps just a severe thunderstorm warning would be enough for you. But again, get into the lowest room in your house. Stay away from windows. Flying debris is one of the biggest hazards when it comes to tornadoes, and they can easily break windows. We've seen trees split in half, so certainly if you're looking out, that's a dangerous place to be. We like you to be in an interior room, like a bathroom or a closet, maybe get into the bathtub. If you're in an apartment building, get to that lowest floor of the apartment building. That's where you need to be in case of a tornado. Now, if you're driving, obviously if you're watching this, I'm hoping you're not driving, although you could be a passenger watching it online. This is what you need to do. If there is a tornado, go to the nearest solid shelter. Drive at a 90-degree angle away from the tornado's path. Find a lower level if no shelter is nearby, and seatbelt on, lower head and cover head with hands. Worst case scenario. Okay, so in Ontario, I know we're going back and forth between Manitoba and Ontario, 14,000 plus without power. This is something that I was talking about earlier on social media, that these winds are going to be strong enough to knock out power. Earlier in the day would have been the time to bring in things that you may have been concerned about flying away or being damaged. You know, I always say tie them down or bring them inside, whatever you can do. So again, I'm hoping that if you knew the storm was coming, that you would have been prepared for power outages. If you have not been prepared, this is the time to do it, because you may not have been impacted yet by the storms as they move across. So we've got storms in Manitoba and in Ontario. Melinda Singh, it's a busy day. And you know, I focused a little bit on southwestern Ontario, but certainly eastern Ontario too has been seeing storms. We've been under severe thunderstorm warnings all along that Ontario-Quebec border too.
Yes, we have been, Kim. The good news is those storms are now a bit more on the non-severe side, which is the good news. We do have some questions from YouTube. Morgan's asking if there's anything for Beamsville, Lincoln, the Grimsby area. So yes, I can definitely answer those questions for you. I'm just going to switch gears here and open the radar to look at what's currently ongoing. So we are seeing that heavy rainfall that is pushing in throughout Beamsville. It is going to continue to move eastward into the Niagara region, Grimsby as well. That's that first cluster. So it's mainly just heavy rainfall that we're currently looking at. And we did have another viewer asking anything for the south side of Lake Ontario. So yes, continue to see that heavy rainfall. The tornado threat has more so diminished for this region, but we are continuing to see quite strong winds and the potential for heavy rainfall. Where we did have tornado warnings earlier, I do want to mention that into the Delhi, Tillsonburg, Simcoe region, there was quite a bit of down trees like Kim showed us earlier, but Dave Sills on Twitter, he did mention that it could potentially be more of a downburst situation in terms of what we have been seeing on radar. So I just wanted to quickly mention that. And we're also tracking heavy rainfall for areas like Wingham, Handover, Port Elgin in the Chelsea region, and another cluster just north of there, making its way in through areas like Elliott Lake, in through areas just south of Sudbury. So quite a bit of active weather continuing at play. Kim did mention areas in through along the Ontario-Quebec border. We are seeing some storms across the region, bringing in quite a bit of heavy rainfall. We're looking at some small hail as well associated with these storms. Overall, quite a big picture. Just zoom out here for you at what we're currently looking at. And then behind it, that secondary MCS, multi-complex storm system. It is going to slowly push its way in across the region. And we'll start to see more of those strong winds and heavy downpours associated with this storm. So I'm just going to draw on the screen to highlight some of these areas with the stronger winds as it's starting to bow out, and of course heavy rainfall associated in those more heavier reds and oranges on the screen. Now, once again, we are in tornado warnings for areas across Manitoba, and through areas east of the city of Winnipeg as well. So a very widespread region. There are currently no tornado warnings across southern Ontario. Those have now dropped, but we're still looking at the threat for severe weather with that secondary line pushing in like I just mentioned. I'll quickly take a look one more time at the radar before we bring Kim in. I'll just quickly put it to the current time setting. Here we go. You can actually see this huge cloud. That's how big the updraft is building. So it's quite a big severe supercell, and it's still bringing in quite a bit of heavy rainfall. And some viewers on Twitter are mentioning that we've been seeing towering supercell to the northeast, and it has a bit of a pronounced hook as well. So that's indicating the potential for a tornado with rotation. So we're looking at areas crossing Highway 9, the threat for areas like Hazel Ridge, Cloverleaf, and Vivian. So if you are in those areas, it's best to head indoors, as there could be a potential tornado in and around the region. And of course, there's two other storm cells that we're also tracking that's currently crossing over the lakes as we speak. There is one that is a baseball-sized hail as one of the main hazards in Environment Canada, and this is the storm that is just along the lake shores of Manitoba. So we are continuing to track these storms with quite a bit of pronounced hail, heavy downpours, and strong winds, and we're going to continue to look at this. Now, Kim, what's going on currently with the tornado warnings.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it pretty much. You know, talking about the size of the hail that we've been seeing, hen egg sized hail. So that's huge. And we're also talking about baseball sized hail as well. So these storms are very severe across parts of Manitoba where we do have the tornado warnings. If I can give you any good news, the rural municipality of St. Andrews, including Selkirk, Lockport, and Ponma, are out of the tornado warning, but St. Clements is still in. The rural municipalities of Broken Head, of Springfield, of East St. Paul, all of these areas still in tornado warnings. Severe thunderstorm located near Hazel Ridge is moving east at 40 kilometers per hour towards Cloverleaf and Beausejour. So those are the areas that are currently seeing tornado warnings. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh. Storm Hunter Mark Robinson is on the scene, so we'll be checking in with him in Ontario soon enough, as well as the other storm that's located near Beaver Creek, moving east at 40 kilometers per hour. So whether or not you are seeing tornadoes, just know that the hail with these storms can be very damaging. I know nobody wants to see hail the size of baseballs. That can do a lot of damage to crops. It certainly can do damage to vehicles. I'm hoping that if you have some kind of a carport or garage, that's where your vehicle is. I know that not everybody has that, but again, tornado warnings in Manitoba should be taken very seriously. There's a lot of lightning on these storms as well, as we've seen in the radar, so just keep that in mind. This is a time to stay indoors. I'm glad you're staying with us here at the Weather Network. And again, if you're in a tornado warning, get into that low level of your home. Do we have Mark Robinson? I'm just wondering. I can see a little something in my preview. Okay.
Hey there.
There we are. Hey, Mark, just bringing you in now.
Yes.
Now, we're jumping from Ontario, or from Manitoba into Ontario. Mark, you've seen a lot of damage already today. What's the latest?
Yeah, I'm actually coming just back into Harrow. I'm doing a quick look at some of the damage that we've seen in the Harrow region. I'm doing a quick check for the Northern Tornadoes Project to sort of see where the worst of it is, and I'm trying to take you back into town a little bit where you'll be able to see some. Stop the car here, and I'm going to point the camera over to the other side of the road where you can sort of see a lot of some of the more significant damage. And you should be able to see that right there. There you go. You see a lot of tree branches down. This one here, you can see that there's there's a tree down over top of this house, sort of way back, sort of buried in there. There's that tree, down over top of the house. And what's interesting is if I go up this tree right here and you look at the tops, that's where a lot of those tops have come off. It looks like all the trees that right at the top, which is sometimes indicative of tornado damage. But at this point, it does look more like this is a big downburst, very similar to what we saw in Alvinston the other week, like last week with the storms that went through there. So very similar damage, lots and lots of tree shred down all over the town. And I'm going to go forward a little bit so you can get an idea of what we're seeing throughout the town of Harrow. Definitely a lot of damage through here, but so far as I've seen, no major structural damage, and I haven't heard of anybody any injuries at this point so far that I've heard. But definitely, people are going to be out cleaning up. But we have to keep in mind there is another line of storms that's headed directly for this area. So, when that comes through, we may see more damage. I right now can't say for sure, but definitely going to be potentially another round of significant storms here in Harrow.
What would you estimate the wind speeds to have been to knock down those trees, Mark? Obviously, it's over 88 kilometers per hour, but you've seen this kind of damage in the past. What would you estimate?
Yeah, I mean, Kim, when I see this kind of damage, usually it says to me it's about 120 kilometers an hour, where you really start to see the trees come down, when you start to see branches come down. But, it could be anywhere from 120 to 130 kilometers an hour fairly easily in and around Harrow. So, at this point, definitely a downburst, but it's hard to say. Northern Tornadoes Project is coming tomorrow. to sort of let everybody know whether or not it was a tornado or downburst. But at this point, myself and Dave Sills are both sort of leaning towards downburst.
Yeah, and the thing is, it doesn't really matter in the end. When there's damage done, there's damage done. So obviously we talk about straight line winds causing just about as much damage as a tornado, but it's just the way things fall. That's the difference between a tornado and straight line winds.
Yeah, I mean, really, you can get, even with the Alvinston, we had almost EF1, speed, winds, but that was a downburst. That was not a tornado, and yet, that still caused a tremendous amount of damage to that town. And again, I'm seeing something similar here in Harrow.
Well, I'm glad you haven't heard of any injuries so far. I know people are going to have to clean up. It's never good to have trees down, especially big old trees that people really love on their property. Hoping everybody's going to be okay there. But as we say, Mark, this is not the end of it. We have more storms on the way. In Ontario right now, we're looking at just severe thunderstorm watches. Our only warning is just on the other side of the Quebec border, on the Quebec side of the Ottawa River. So we do have a severe thunderstorm warning there. Otherwise, just watches, and most of them in southern Ontario. And a watch just means we have the ingredients for severe weather. When you have the warning, it means it is happening or is on your doorstep. When it comes to tornado warnings in Manitoba, I just want to go back there because some of our warnings have come to an end. I always love to deliver that news in the rural municipalities of St. Clements, including Grand Beach, Broken Head, and Libau, as well as East St. Paul, including Birds Hill. So those areas are now out of the tornado warning, but continuing to be in the warning. Broken Head, including Beausejour and Garson, and Springfield, including Enola and Birds Hill Provincial Park. And you can always tweet me, KMACTWN, if you want to correct my pronunciation on where you live. I'm happy to hear it. And again, severe thunderstorm watches on either side. Tornado watch in brown, and anywhere in pink on this map is under a tornado warning. We've been seeing some significant storms in Manitoba. I'm going to throw it now to meteorologist Melinda Singh, who has a close look at the radar and what's happening in the cloud tops as well. Really get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on here.
Thank you so much, Kim. I just want to first start off with a big overview of looking at the satellite. If you look over in through southern Ontario, quite a dynamic storm structure, and then right behind it, you can slowly see it kind of bloom, so to speak, as it moves in behind. That's just the past hour or two, and we're seeing that's next system. That's actually what Mark was talking about, pushing in through southwestern Ontario and through places that have seen a little bit of damage already. So this is the second one that will be pushing in afterwards. So quite a big storm complex, and those supercells that we're tracking, that's tornado warned in areas of Manitoba, very high cloud tops, and very indicative here on radar as well. So we are tracking quite a bit of active weather right across the country. Let's start off first in through Manitoba, where we're still tracking these storms. These are very strong, pronounced supercells. We did see a bit of a hook signature on radar as it crossed over Highway 9 just a few minutes ago. So quite a bit of structure, and that continues to move eastward. So if you are in these areas, please take cover, like Kim mentioned, because it's quite a big storm complex, heavy rainfall across the region as well. And it's very close to the city of Winnipeg, so still quite populated areas surrounding the city. So we are going to be looking and tracking these as they continue to make their way through eastward into the coming hours. We're also been seeing baseball-sized hail, I believe, on Twitter. Kim will be talking about that momentarily. But here's a look at the other two storms, supercells to be more specific, continuing to make its way over, bringing quite a bit of heavy rainfall throughout the region. Now we'll take a look at Ontario, where I just want to highlight a bit of the radar. So here's a look at the radar here. I'll just quickly press play so it plays out. I can mention we're still looking at just some severe thunderstorm watches ahead of this. There's also some in through southern Michigan, in through Ohio and Illinois, as this complex system pushes right across the region, heaviest downpours on the south side of the storm, and we're still looking at it bowing out. So that's one of the signatures we look at on radar, indicating that there is strong winds, but quite a bit of heavy rainfall associated with these storms, and they will be momentarily starting to see a little bit of that cell up before it, pushing in through areas just north of Wallaceburg, Marine City. Currently, we're also still tracking this stronger storm cluster that's now impacting areas across the GTA. So areas like Hamilton, Oakville, Toronto, Brampton, the skies are getting dark. We're seeing some more moderate rainfall. There's yellows on your screen. And then areas like Niagara Falls, Beamsville, Welland. So quite a bit of heavy rainfall in those reds on your screen. And of course, we're still looking at threats for damaging wind gusts in through areas like Owen Sound, Hanover, Georgian Bay, another cluster there that's also moving eastward and bringing in heavy rainfall. So widespread rainfall with these storm clusters, and that does continue in through areas of northeastern Ontario and through southern Quebec. Like Kim mentioned, we're starting to see a bit more of a bigger cluster here. This is now warned for areas like St. Jove, Greenville, and through St. Jerome. So looking at and tracking these storms as well. They will continue to make its way eastward, but now, Kim, we've been looking at Twitter, seeing different sizes of hail that people have been capturing pictures of in Manitoba.
Yeah, you know, I was looking at those warnings, and Environment and Climate Change Canada was talking about the size of hail that's been falling in Manitoba. First baseball-sized hail, and then hen egg-sized hail. And this is photographic evidence. So this looks like it's near Fisher River, Cree Nation. Never seen hail like this before. So I'm just reading the tweet. Just unbelievable. I just want to see if I can get, okay, so Jeremy Knoll put this out on Twitter, just massive hail, and that's going to cause all kinds of damage. I think we've got some video too of the storms that were rolling through Ontario a little bit earlier when Mark Robinson was out. This was near Dresden in southwestern Ontario, some pretty ominous looking skies. That was kicking things off late in the afternoon, and now we're waiting on this second round of storms. So it's not over yet for Ontario. Most of the areas we were mentioning is still under a severe thunderstorm watch, but in Manitoba, there's our watches, our warnings on the other side in Quebec, but we're also talking about warnings in Manitoba. That's where we have been seeing the tornado warnings that continue there. Some of them have dropped off, certainly, but other areas are still in it. And we're talking about not only rotating storms, but storms that are producing that massive hail, that kind of hail that can cause real damage. I feel bad for anybody who may have been driving in that kind of weather, because it is absolutely brutal, just so dangerous. Right now, not so bad in Ontario. I'm going to bring it back to Melinda just because I have to change my maps before I can continue here. But here's a look again at the satellite and radar over Ontario. You were just mentioning Hamilton, St. Catharines getting it recently. More storms behind this huge area of rain, and not just rain, but heavy rain. We're seeing rain right outside of our studios right now in Oakville, not surprisingly, but this is nothing compared to what was happening earlier when we saw all those trees down in places like Harrow, in Kingsville as well. So southwestern Ontario taking the brunt of these storms earlier. Not as bad right now, but things aren't quite over yet, Melinda.
Yeah, they will continue. I just want to actually highlight the same map that you're using. It's such a good map to highlight. We're also seeing all these little whites on the screen, these little dots. These are actually lightning strikes. So it's very potent atmosphere throughout Michigan, southwestern Ontario, even areas across the GTA. You know, we're not seeing as a storm dynamic that we saw earlier in southwestern Ontario. That's because a little bit more weaker energy across the region, which is good news because it's just heavy rainfall, lightning, thunder, and strong winds associated with these storms as they move through the GTA. We are getting questions on if they will be impacting the GTA. We are looking, and currently, just like Kim mentioned, some rainfall outside of TW1 headquarters here in Oakville, down throughout areas right along the Golden Horseshoe, and they will be extending eastward into the eastern portions of the GTA in through the next couple of minutes or so. So just heavy rainfall for the most part, which is some good news. That's the yellows on your screen here. So Hamilton, Milton, right along the QEW, the 4-1 corridor, down into Niagara. So we are looking at a little bit more energy down and through the Niagara region, Welland, Dunnville. Some lightning strikes here. So just some rumbles of thunder in through areas of the GTA. This is the first round, and we'll have to continue to watch as that second system makes its way throughout the region, if it will be continuing to hold the energy as it makes its way east, potentially impacting the GTA in throughout the overnight hours. But as you know, as we lose that daytime, the sun, we lose the daytime heating, so it won't sustain itself as it continues in through the overnight hours, depending on how much energy you have. So that's where we get some nocturnal storms in through the overnight hours. I did mention we are seeing a little bit more heavier rainfall in through the areas like Port Elgin, Hanover, Wingham, just south of Owen Sound, and then in through areas now coming on shore, tip of Georgian Bay there, and in through areas in Lake Superior, starting to see more of the heavier rainfall pushing through, potentially impacting areas like Barrie, Midland, Parry Sound in the coming hours also. So the next storm system, that MCS pushing through, that's what we're going to be looking at, the potential for these storms impacting areas across the region and still bringing quite a bit of lightning. And you can see another storm system right behind it. That's actually bringing in the threat for more lightning and heavy downpours. We could be looking at some large hail associated with this, some of it giving way to a bit of a hook signature that we're going to continue to track as well. So in through areas of Michigan, we're going to be looking at these storms slowly making its way in across the southwestern portions of the province. But I will quickly change over and look at areas in through Manitoba. We were also tracking some severe storms, some supercells as well. Here we are, so I'll just quickly zoom out for you. So 3 supercells of note, one just southeast of Winnipeg, that's crossing over Highway 9, moving into 7 Sister Falls. So we are looking at quite a bit of heavy rainfall. We did see some reports on Twitter, like Kim showed earlier, of baseball size hail. I even saw toonie size hail as well on Twitter. And in through the inner lake region here as well, these storms continuing to make its way eastward, and they are still sustaining itself. So bringing quite a bit of heavy rainfall as they continue to move eastward. So once again, here's a look at the tornado warning map, as some of them have been extended, and I think Kim is going to tell us exactly where and what these locations are.
Yeah, it's good. We have some that are in and some that are out. So the new ones, and that's for that middle area of severe weather. So that's Bifrost, Riverton, including Arborg, Nassau, and Hecla. So those are areas that are under the tornado warning. Again, around the Gimli area, we're talking about near Blacks Point, moving east at 40 kilometers per hour. This storm has a history of producing baseball-sized hail, and locations impacted will include Deer Island. Out of the warning, Moose Creek Provincial Forest, Pine Duck, and Matheson Island are out of the tornado warning. Now, farther south, Lac de Bonnet is under the tornado warning now, as well as the rural municipality of Reynolds, including St. Rita, Haddishville, and Rennie. So those areas are now new to the tornado warning. That was the cell that's closer to Winnipeg. It's extending now to the south and east, as Melinda was saying. Still in it, Broken Head, including Beausejour and Garson, and Springfield, including Enola and Birds Hill Provincial Park. And this particular cell near Beausejour is moving east at 40 kilometers per hour, as these storms tend to do. They tend to race east, not always, but 40 kilometers per hour seems to be the norm, at least with today's storms. And it's racing towards Molson and St. Rita. So these are the areas that need to be prepared now, need to get into shelter now. Lowest room in your home if you've got a house, and lowest room in a building if you're in an apartment, for example. A hail up to the size of hen egg has been reported with this thunderstorm. So a chicken egg is what we're talking about, and that can be extremely damaging. What's also dangerous with any of these storms is lightning. And so how do we detect it? Let's take a look.
Here's a man-made lightning rod, really attracting a cloud-to-ground lightning strike there. Happens about 5 times a year for the Eiffel Tower, over 70 times for the CN Tower. But how can we detect these cloud-to-ground lightning strikes? We use a process coined triangulation. We can't just rely on a single lightning detection sensor to pinpoint that exact location. We need to rely on at least 3. 2 gives a general location, 2 possible locations, but we really need to solidify that location by utilizing at least 3 sensors in that system. Now, how do we detect lightning over 10,000 kilometers away, the Arctic Circle, or even the North Pole? We have to rely on the ionosphere. That's a location in the atmosphere with a high concentration of ions and free electrons, and that bounces off that layer in the atmosphere, and that signal can travel quite a long distance. Now, we're still working on the science with intra-cloud lightning. That signal isn't as strong, so we're generally fairly poor at detecting this type of lightning, although it makes for spectacular, beautiful skies.
Sure does, as long as you're indoors. This is a look at lightning potential with these storms through the late night hours, and we can see a lot of areas where we suspect there will be lightning on these storms. So even if you're not in a tornado warning, even if you're just in a severe thunderstorm watch, you're going to want to be aware, right? Thunder roars, head indoors. You can't mess with that. Sometimes lightning can happen far away from the actual storm itself, and sometimes lightning can happen long after a storm has passed. Half an hour after a storm has passed, there's still electricity in the atmosphere. So here's a look at the 3 areas of concern where we have tornado warnings in Manitoba. There are 3 cells. This one came awfully close to Winnipeg, not moving through Winnipeg though, passing by just to the north, and we still have tornado warnings south and east of Winnipeg, those areas most recently added. So let's take a look once more. I believe I have the watches and warnings. They're not coming up. I'm having issues with my maps today. Okay, so just keep that in mind. There's that lightning again. And the energy in the atmosphere, or the CAPE, is what we talk about, one of the many ingredients that can bring on these kinds of storms. And we're looking again at the risk of severe weather continuing into Thursday. This is typical for July. Manitoba seeing this kind of weather certainly. And not just Manitoba, but Ontario too. Both areas have been dealing with severe thunderstorms. Tornado warnings in place in Ontario earlier. Right now, things have settled down, at least temporarily, which is good considering some communities are cleaning up at this hour. So they're dealing with that. And I just want to show you, if I have it here. Oh, see, even this is not working for me. Here we go. This was over Lake Erie at Long Point. Bob Krause showed us this particular storm. So this was earlier in the day when we did have tornado warnings across southern Ontario, and Lake Erie was one of those places impacted along the shores of Lake Erie, around Port Stanley as well, which is not far from Long Point, by the way. But this was the kind of cloud we saw when that tornado warning had been issued. And we appreciate your photos and your videos, and we appreciate when you allow us to use them on air and on our live stream, but we don't want you to do anything that's dangerous, obviously. So never do it at your own peril. It is never worth the photo or the video if you're going to put yourself in any kind of danger. When you can see a storm from across a lake, that's probably the best place to be, as long as you can get in pretty quickly. And Bob even commented on this tweet that the sand kicked up and he felt like he was in a sandstorm for a moment there because the winds were just so strong at one point with these storms, and we've seen a lot of wind damage as a result. And our storm hunter Mark Robinson just speaking recently about the fact that they think these are straight line winds and maybe a downburst, microburst in parts of these areas rather than a rotating storm, but still damage nonetheless. Let's go back to Manitoba now with Melinda Singh.
Thank you, Kim. I just want to highlight the overall risk graphic that we have made, that we've been forecasting for areas highlighted in red on your screen. That's indicating the threat for more severe likely storms, so confidence is there in those regions to see the threat for rotation. all the ingredients are coming together. We have the instability, which is CAPE, known as convective available potential energy. That's when we get those warmer temperatures and the heat rises, building the clouds. And the more CAPE we have, the more we're likely to look at the more threat for more stronger storms, depending on if there's helicity. Another factor that we look at, wind shear as well, which is where we have different rotating heights in the atmosphere at different levels, different directions. And when we get all these ingredients coming together, that's when we get the confidence to be like, hey, we're looking at the threat for more severe storms in and around this region. So that's why we've highlighted the red area for you all to be on the alert if you are in these areas. The threat for rotations that we've been seeing, tornado warnings popping up in this area as well. Even areas in orange on your screen indicating the threat. We're not too confident on the threat that there is going to be storms, but still severe storms. And of course, once we have severe storms, there is a chance for rotations. Once again, the ingredients are coming together. So the overall threat, it is supercells scattered in nature along a frontal boundary, and that's going to slowly make its way into areas of northwestern Ontario. In fact, as we continue in towards the overnight hours into your early day Thursday. So slow moving system, that's a trigger for our storms, and we've already seen large hail, baseball size to be more specific. Of some pictures on Twitter. So if you do have pictures, please tweet us, and we'll happily show them on air or use them in our features. Now for areas, parts of the Trans-Canada Highway, they are under tornado warning. So I'm just going to quickly move over to this graphic that's highlighting these regions. Oh yes, so they have indicated areas along the Trans-Canada. So if you are in these areas like Reynolds, Lewis, Pinawa, just east of the city of Winnipeg, make sure you are heading indoors. The skies are probably really dark there. It's a very large supercell, and it's producing quite a bit of rainfall. I did mention the heavy hail, the large hail as well. And also, not only are we seeing the threat for more severe storms in Manitoba, but also in through Ontario. I'll just quickly show a quick look at the satellite once again before we bring in our storm hunter. But here's a look at what's going on. We're seeing that storm cell, this strong cluster of storms impacting areas along the 401 corridor, down and through downtown Toronto, also impacting areas like Welland, Niagara Falls region, and that's slowly making its way eastward. It'll make its way over Lake Ontario, but then behind it, we're looking at another storm cluster pushing in, known as the MCS. And this is bringing in the threat for strong winds already in places of Michigan, and we'll slowly see it crossing the border into the next couple of minutes into the coming hour or so, Kim. So we're going to continue to track these storms here for you all night.
Yeah, I'm going to I know I'm showing Ontario, but I'm just going to jump back to Manitoba just for a second to talk about the latest tornado warnings. And Melinda did mention Pinawa. So Pinawa, you are now in the tornado warning, including Seven Sisters Falls. Also, Whitemouth, including Elma, has recently been added. And so these storms are moving east at 40 kilometers per hour towards St. Rita and Whitemouth this hour. Hail up to the size of hen egg has been reported with this particular thunderstorm. And then Blood Vein is now in the tornado warning as well, and that's the cell that's farther north in Manitoba. So those two areas, that particular storm is located near Deer Island, moving east at 40 kilometers per hour, and it has been producing baseball-sized hail. Okay, so that's the latest in Manitoba. Back to Ontario, where we had seen some wind damage in places like Harrow and in Kingsville. Our storm hunter, Mark Robinson, is now on the shores of Lake Erie, again, where these earlier storms brought some damage, and boy, what a mess behind you.
Yeah, this is some of the worst damage I've seen. I'm down in Colchester, and you can actually see, I don't know if you can, I was trying to look into the camera there just to see whether you can see it, but this very large tree that's come down over top of this house here definitely has done some significant damage to the house, but I can see right in the center of that tree, it's very rotted. So that tells me that you don't need tornado force winds to push this over. Now, having said that, we're probably looking at 120, 130 kilometers an hour. But what is interesting for me is that this is the town directly south of Colchester, of Harrow, which is where we saw all that damage earlier. Now I'm down here seeing very similar damage, which says to me this is probably not tornadic damage. In fact, this is likely straight line winds as this whole system sort of came through. Now, we are watching that next line. It's very unusual for me to be down taking a look at damage and be concerned about new storms coming from the west. I've been watching over the radar the last couple of scans. It does look like some of the stronger parts of that storm are just a little bit maybe likely to go out over Lake Erie or maybe even just on the south shore of Erie. But having said that, there is a lot of rain in there as well. So, any sort of cleanup that's going on anywhere in this area, you're about to get soaked. So, maybe save the cleanup till tomorrow and when you can be a little drier and definitely a little more safe if there are some winds on these new line of storms that are coming through. Because that second line was the one we were more concerned about. But I'm sort of going, okay, I better watch this one very closely as it comes in.
Yeah, that's the thing. People get out there. Obviously, they want to clean up that damage, Mark. And then you start getting rained on and, God forbid, wind, and anything that's loose might go flying again. So yeah, it can get dangerous. And I want to know your expertise on this. When we already have a line of thunderstorms, when it's taken so much energy out of the atmosphere, how strong can the second round be?
Well, that's the whole thing. It's not just about how much heat is in there. It's these new storms are being driven a little bit by the dynamics, which is how the wind or how the air moves through the atmosphere. And these ones are sitting just sort of in where we have a little bit of a jet streak, a little higher up in the atmosphere, and that's driving the storm. So we don't necessarily need all of the same energy that we had earlier. Combine those two, and this afternoon's damage would have been much more significant than this. So I think in some ways we got a little bit lucky. But Kim, I can tell you that it is damp, it is humid, and it is warm again. That is the big change that I felt in the last, I think, about half an hour, where we have gotten that energy coming back in here just a little bit. So the storm's definitely feeding a little bit, but at the same time, Lake Erie, it's a cold lake. It's a very large lake, so it's a little bit of stable marine layer there. So it's gonna limit it. So I really need to see those storms to tell you whether they're going to be strong or not. And that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to be down at the beach, sort of watching off to the west to see what those storms look like.
Okay, well, hopefully not too bad for an area that's already been hit. Storms don't often hit the same place twice on the same day, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. It can happen. So again, this is the first line of storms that rolled through, and again, just south of the border in Michigan, making their way towards the Ontario border. For the tornado warnings in Manitoba, we're talking about a storm that is moving east at 40 kilometers per hour towards St. Rita and Whitemouth. These areas are under the tornado warning, at least the most recent one. So Pinawa, including Seven Sisters Falls, and Whitemouth, including Elma. So those are the latest to be added to the tornado warning, and one tornado warning has ended, and that is for Jackhead Reserve. That particular area was under a tornado warning earlier. It was reissued and now has ended again, which I'm sure is a big relief for a lot of people. Okay, now I'm checking in with our meteorologist, Melinda Singh.
Thank you so much, Kim. Now, I just want to highlight what we have been seeing in terms of lightning strikes over the past couple of hours as the storm cluster made its way through southwestern Ontario, now impacting areas around the Golden Horseshoe. So the majority of the lightning strikes is mainly in southwestern Ontario, not too much across the GTA, which is the good news. It's just mainly heavy rainfall as we continue into the next couple of minutes. But as you can see right behind it in areas of Michigan, look how many lightning strikes, and that cluster of storms, like Mark mentioned, that's going to be making its way in through areas of southwestern Ontario come the next half an hour or so. So we're going to be tracking these storm clusters, even seeing a bit of lightning with those storms and through areas along the Ontario and Quebec border. So quite a bit of lightning. And I do want to highlight, of course, Manitoba, where we've been seeing those supercell-like structure is pushing in across the region. Here is that one more of note in through areas just northeast of the city of Winnipeg. Lots of lightning. We've been seeing hail, heavy downpours, very strong storm structure on these. And of course, I just want to highlight the fact that we've been seeing quite a bit of rainfall in through areas of southern Ontario. This is just what the radar is estimating. Could be seeing a little bit more higher totals as well, but just a quick look upwards to 20 to 30 millimeters of rainfall that has pushed through the past couple of hours. Now, as we head over to the current radar, I just want to make its way, let's go back into Manitoba, where we are continuing to see quite a bit of lightning, lots of rainfall on these storms. So it is slowly moving eastward. Here we go. Here's current time for us. So still seeing a little bit of those pinks on the screen. That's indicating a little bit more stronger rain, heavier rainfall, and the potential for large hail also. So quite a bit of lightning, and all the storm dynamics are continuing to come into effect. So we'll now track in through areas of Ontario where we are looking at rainfall pushing in. That is now impacting areas across the 401 corridor, in through areas like just on the QW, in through Niagara region, Welland, Port Colborne, seeing heavy rainfall. And now it's starting to ease, so a bit more lighter rainfall in the next couple of hours as the system continues to make its way eastward. We're also seeing a bit more heavier rainfall in Port Elgin, Hanover, Owen Sound, and through the Georgian Bay region, and those continue as another storm complex is in and around that region. And of course, we can't forget areas along the border of Ontario and Quebec, where we've been seeing some stronger storm structures as well. So they're now impacting areas in through southern Quebec, bringing with it quite a bit of lightning, not as strong and pronounced as we've been seeing in through southern Ontario, but still some decent storm structures, but they are a little bit slow moving, so looking at a threat for more heavier downpours. This is that same line that pushed through, so it is bringing quite a bit of heavy rainfall and lightning to areas in through Ohio and Pennsylvania, but still keeping our eye on this strong storm structure in through Michigan, and it's slowly migrating in through areas of Sarnia. We're seeing a cell pop in there, but once again, that bow line segment, that is what's pronouncing and giving way to those strong gusty winds. We'll slowly see it migrate across the international border and making its way into Windsor. I want to say the next 20 minutes to around 30 minutes or so, we'll slowly see it make its way through, but probably targeting areas like Windsor, Chatham, Kent, and then some of these more weaker storms impacting areas like Sarnia, potentially in through the London region. And we could be looking at, once again, nocturnal storms across the area. So lots of active weather continuing across the region. We still currently have severe thunderstorm watches in place for majority of southwestern Ontario. And in through Michigan, there's only one severe thunderstorm warning, no tornado watches, no tornado warnings, which is the good news. The only place of concern for rotation as of now is in through Manitoba, where it's more of a widespread tornado watch region. And we're still looking at tornado warnings in those areas that Kim mentioned earlier. So quite a bit of active weather continuing in through. We've been seeing those strong gusty winds. And Kim, here's a look at what we've seen the past 24 hours.
Yeah, you know, the wind gusts have been fairly strong with anybody who experienced those earlier storms in Ontario. St. Catharines, a 74 kilometer per hour wind gust down towards Windsor, 87 kilometer per hour wind gusts. Now those are the stations that we're showing here, but obviously places in between saw much more powerful winds. We're estimating well over 100 kilometers per hour with the damage that we've seen along the shoreline of Lake Erie. A squall line is what we have been looking at. Looks like there's another one on its tail. So what is a squall line? Here's meteorologist Jacqueline Whittle with an explanation.
When it comes to severe weather, we all think about the tornado as being the most destructive type, and it is. But there's a close second. It's called straight line winds, and it happens in what we call a squall line of thunderstorms. Basically, it would look like this on radar. It's called a squall line because it's a line of thunderstorms that are kind of joining forces, if you will. It occurs when the upper level winds, the jet stream, are parallel to the actual front that's triggering the thunderstorms, and it can cause very strong wind gusts. So a hypothetical setup here is our upper level flow, a trough over the Great Lakes. We've got wind vectors coming out of the southwest. So when we have those southwest winds lining up with the cold front, and the surface winds, everything's aligned, so we see storms out ahead of the front that sort of join forces like an army of thunderstorms, or imagine kids in the school ground holding hands and forming a line. That's the way I like to think about this. They can be very beautiful to see in the field. This is what it would look like if you saw one. This video in Dresden, this is a shelf cloud, and often will be out ahead of a squall line, and can be quite remarkable to see. So let's just break down that gust front. You can understand what's going on. A gust front is when a storm becomes outflow dominant, so the cold air is winning over the warm air and the downdraft takes over. So we've got that cold pool of air, and it forms as cold air pools out ahead of that racing squall line. And sometimes not only can you get downbursts and microbursts, but you can even get a brief, what we call gustnado, and they don't do a lot of damage, but they do happen with a squall line.
Okay, this is the kind of damage that was done with that squall line. This is John Freeman's tree. It looks like, I don't know if it's his tree, but he certainly tweeted this out. Some serious damage across southern Ontario. And our storm hunter, Mark Robinson, has been out and about chasing the storms and then looking at damage done in its wake, but watching what's coming next. Hi, Mark, where are you and what's going on?
Down at the beach in Colchester, watching the line of storms that is coming sort of across the lake now. I'm just taking a quick look here at the radar, and it does look like the strongest part of the storms maybe just south of the Harrow region. There's still going to be wind and rain and lightning, but they really, at this point, it does look like the more damaging wind will be maybe over the lake. There may be some onshore. I'm watching this carefully, because I don't want to say for sure, everything's fine at this point. So I'm really watching that dark line back there. I don't know, there. Let me see if I can get my hand on it. There you go. That dark line down there is the approaching gust front that's coming towards us. I do see at this point a nice, it looks like a nice little shapely shelf out there. One of the things that is a bit different than what I normally experience after a storm that has moved through, like the ones we saw earlier, there's a lot of warm, moist air moving in that's blowing right into here, and that is going to be feeding this line of storms as it comes towards southwest Ontario. How far through southwest Ontario this storm is going to get, a little bit unknown. I really have to see, how close to the ground this storm is. If it's very close to the ground, that the shelf there, that's going to tell me a lot. That's going to tell me that this one is feeding on that warm, moist air right along the surface, which may mean that it's going to be a bit more significant. Now, if that layer's a little higher up, it means that it's not really getting down to the surface, and we may not see, extremely strong wind gusts. But it's definitely something I'm watching. Probably going to be into this area in about the next, it looks to be about the next half hour or so.
I'm curious why all the seagulls are planted right beside you there, Mark. It's like you've got a crowd watching, and I'm wondering what they are predicting. Maybe they're all just keeping an eye on that storm as well.
I think they're predicting French fries, but they're not getting any from me. But yeah, no, often I'd see, the birds are smart. They're sort of sitting on the ground going, we know what's coming, and we're just going to, ride it out on the beach. It's a good spot for birds to be.
Always watch the birds. They know what they're doing. Okay, thanks, Mark, for the intel. We're going to take a look back now at some of the damage that was done earlier across southern Ontario. We have a compilation of videos to show you just how strong the winds were and how powerful these storms were in general. This is near Dresden, and this is Mark Robinson's video. He captured this earlier, got caught right in the middle of the storm, by the way, in Long Point, again on the shores of Lake Erie. Bob showing us the shelf cloud moving through, just gorgeous, and talked about how the sand kicked up very quickly immediately afterward. In Winnipeg, we've had some major storms just outside of the city. In fact, in much of Manitoba, we've been seeing severe weather. Harrow Back to southern Ontario, seeing tree damage there, just absolutely destroyed. And here's another massive tree down. Lots of damage here, trees uprooted as well. I'm not sure if this is still Harrow, it could be. But yeah, trees down on vehicles and on homes as well. Mark Robinson at a house that saw a tree down, but that is just unbelievable. So again, there's not much you can do in storms like this, but to keep the area around your home as safe as possible would probably be the only advice at that point. But these things are hard to predict, who will get what. Another line of storms coming to follow this initial one. And I wanted to mention in Manitoba, a couple of areas have been dropped now from the tornado warning, and that includes Broken Head, including Beausejour and Garson. So you are now out of the warning, as well as Springfield, including Enola and Birds Hill Provincial Park. You are also out of the tornado warning in Manitoba. Okay, back to Storm Center with meteorologist Melinda Singh, who's been looking at these storms in both provinces. Ontario storms, the worst is over. It's cleanup time, but things continue in Manitoba. On the bright side, some of the tornado watch has even come to an end.
Yes, that is the good news. We're starting to see these supercells actually continue to make their way eastward. Here's just a current look where what the radar is showing, those supercells in through areas of the Inner Lake region, Lake Manitoba. They're slowly moving eastward, which is the good news. And this big storm cluster that we've been tracking that brought baseball-sized hail across the region, we are still looking at a bit of rotation in around just east of Whitemouth. So we are continuing to track a little bit of rotation on this storm cell here, and of course still looking at the potential for large hail. We are seeing a little bit of that moisture spilling in through northwestern Ontario, to be more specific. So we are seeing a little bit of that moisture pushing through, and the potential, if these storms do sustain itself, it could eventually make its way as well in through areas like Little Grand Rapids and pushing in through northwestern Ontario. So we're still tracking these storms in through areas of Manitoba. We're also looking at some light non-severe storms in through areas of Prince Albert currently, and then in through areas of looks like Edmonton is also looking at the threat for some scattered showers, a little bit of a non-severe storm across the region, the Pocono, Rocky Mountain House as well. So a little bit of active weather across the prairie provinces, just highlighting what we saw throughout the past day. These are not warned as of yet, so just no non-severe storms across Alberta, central Alberta, and the Prince Albert storms as well, non-severe nature at this time. We are, though, continuing to track these monster cells that continue to push in through areas of eastern Manitoba and spilling in through areas of northwestern Ontario. So it is going to be a bit more of a longer night for some, as the potential for these storms continues in through the coming hours. Now, we'll head back to Ontario, where we've been talking about these storms that pushed through earlier this afternoon, brought a bit of damage across the region. And that's where we had Mark out on the scene looking at some of the damages across the region. Just having this graphic wasn't loading, but now it's here on the screen for us. So I'll just play it out. This is going throughout the past hour or so. We slowly saw these storm cells push eastward, bring in some rainfall down through the Niagara region and through the GTA. Just a little bit of light rainfall, which is a good news. These storms are not warned. No severe warnings or thunderstorm, tornado warnings on these storms. It's just severe thunderstorm watches in areas of southwestern Ontario, because we are awaiting the potential for the storm cluster to push through. Like Mark said, it is looking to just pretty much hang over the lake, which is some good news. And where we've seen those strong gusty winds, that's an area of concern. Like I mentioned, looking at those winds gust upwards to over 100 kilometers per hour in and around this region. So the majority of the stronger dynamics of the storm will push over through areas of Lake Erie, but we're still looking at some heavy rainfall and such pushing in through Windsor. Looks like we have a little bit of heavy rainfall, a bit of lightning in the Sarnia-Petrolia region, and that's currently what's going on across areas of Ontario. We are seeing some stormy cluster pushing over Georgian Bay here, so Parry Sound, Midland, Could be expecting some heavy rainfall in the next 10, 20, 30 minutes or so. And then once again, we're still tracking these storms. They're very slow moving for areas in portions of southern Quebec, so producing quite a bit of heavy rainfall, a bit of lightning as well. Haven't seen any reports of hail, but the threat for some small to large hail is definitely on the table as well. And we're going to continue to track these here. It looks like Kim has some more pictures of damages or wind trees down in areas of Ontario or Manitoba. I'm not too sure. Kim?
These are trees down in Ontario in a pool, as a matter of fact, which is terrible when we're in some of the hottest days of the summer. This is in Harrow, Essex County, where we did have a tornado warning at one point. Noof Dog Mom tweeted this out. Are we still saying tweeted? I'm still saying tweeted. Okay, so there we go. So we do have damage there, but this is just one of many photos that we've seen across southern Ontario, and certainly our storm hunter Mark Robinson has been capturing these scenes in real life as he's down in southwestern Ontario. So many trees on the ground at this point in time, thousands without power at one point. Just severe thunderstorm watches now on this side of the border. Here's a look at those storms as they're racing across Lake Ontario, and then storms behind them just knocking on the Ontario border, coming in from Michigan towards Windsor, but no severe thunderstorm warnings for southwestern Ontario. I'm sure you're probably happy about that, considering the cleanup that some of you have to do at this point in time. Here's another shot. This is in Kingsville, Ontario. Steve Lanson showing us a massive tree that is down on the ground there because of the gusty winds. Here's another one split almost at the base. And John Freeman in Kingsville, again in southwestern Ontario, showing us some pretty serious damage. If you had trees that were weak at all, they're going to be coming down in winds like this, 120 kilometers per hour. It doesn't look like this is tornado damage. Certainly a tornado can do damage like that. But according to our storm hunter, Mark Robinson, and Dave Sills from the Northern Tornadoes Project, it looks more like a squall line or maybe a massive downburst of some sort. So straight line winds, the kinds of winds that can uproot or snap trees. And when we're looking at wind speeds here, we're not talking about the 120s in Windsor or St. Catharines. Those are the areas where I see the highest numbers. These are wind gusts over the last 24 hours, so 87 kilometers per hour in Windsor, 74 in St. Catharines. But the winds that cause that damage that we were showing in Kingsville and in Harrow, Essex, that's more than 80 or 90 kilometers per hour. So 88 to 100 plus when we're talking about winds and the kind of damage they can do. That's trees uprooted and major structural damage. Light structural damage is what we've seen so far. Not a ton of homes that seem like they're that they've incurred some kind of damage, but trees have fallen on some of these homes, and we've seen that. Will it make a dent in the heat and humidity? Well, temporarily. So with those systems coming through, those storms coming through earlier, temperatures dropped. You may have felt it. Still sticky in the atmosphere, but temperatures went from 29 degrees to 21 degrees in Windsor in a matter of an hour or less. But we will still continue to see that heat and humidity build over the next couple of days, and it means you're not out of the woods for pop-up thunderstorms once more. But it was today, Melinda, that we had suspected we'd have the best chance of seeing severe weather with the setup that we had and that system moving towards the Great Lakes.
Yeah, we've been forecasting this the past couple of days, and the ingredients did come to play. We were a little bit uncertain whether there'd be 2 lines versus 1 line, but it looks like as the models, as the days came closer, the models started to get a bit more into agreement that there would be 2 lines of or clusters that we're now calling it MCSs that are pushing in through areas of Ontario. Now here's more of a widespread look at what's going on right across the country. Tornado warnings and across Manitoba, and looking at a bit more of a severe storm complex. The second one now entering areas in southwestern Ontario. So I'll just quickly zoom in here for us. There is that first one that pushed through. It did slow down when it made its way in through southwestern Ontario earlier in the afternoon. It was moving quite quickly at around 80 kilometers per hour. Now it's moving around 50 to 60 kilometers per hour, but it is breaking up. But we're still seeing a bit more widespread rainfall across the region. There is the second one. You can see the reds. That's indicating how big and how wide the cloud tops are. So it's a very big, complex storm. And the more potent part of this is pushing in through areas just south of Windsor, which is the good news. We're still going to be looking and tracking the potential for more stronger dynamics in and around the Windsor region. But it looks like the stronger wind threat, like Mark mentioned, will be pushing over Lake Erie, which is quite a bit of good news. And we're still tracking supercells across areas of Manitoba, now slowly migrating into northwestern Ontario. So if the dynamics still are in play, we could be looking at tornado warnings popping up for areas along the Manitoba and northwestern Ontario border. So lots of energy, lots of instability to help continue to fuel these storms. Here's a current look at what's going on in terms of the alerts. Severe thunderstorm watches in yellow. In red, there's one just north here, Bergen's River. This is severe thunderstorm warning. Areas in brown, tornado watches, meaning that the conditions are favorable for development of tornadoes with these storms. And areas highlighted in pink on your screen or purple are tornado warnings in effect. So these are the supercells that we've been tracking. This is the one that popped up just north of Winnipeg, and it was northeast as it continued to develop and make its way through across the region to areas like Pinawa, Lewis, Whitemouth. Are seeing quite a bit of heavy rainfall, the potential for some large hail. We did see tennis ball sized hail, baseball sized hail, in fact, across the region on Twitter. Lots of photos and videos coming in. So thank you for tweeting us and hashtagging MB Storm so we could see what's ongoing on the ground. And then in through areas of Ontario as well. We're tracking these storms pushing through. Just rainfall at this point in time, but quite a bit of severe thunderstorm watches still in play from Windsor, London, Goderich, even in through areas of Hamilton and Niagara region. And of course, we're still looking at these storms in through areas of southern portions of Quebec and even in the Pembroke region, Deep River, looking at some non-severe storms in through portions of the region. So lots of convective instability that's producing these storms, helping them to sustain itself, and lots of lightning as well. Just quickly show us what we've been experiencing with these lightning strikes, lots of it with these storm cells as they continue to track eastward, and even through areas of Manitoba, we've been seeing lots of lightning strikes. So very developed storms that continue to push its way through. In terms of the rainfall, we haven't been seeing too much, which is the good news, but roughly upwards 20 to 30 millimeters of rainfall, especially for southwestern Ontario. A bit more lighter amounts of rainfall that we've been seeing. This is just radar estimated, but for areas in around the Golden Horseshoe, a bit more on the lighter side, which is the good news. So this is just a quick glimmer of what we could be expecting. And there's that secondary system, that MCS, that is pushing. So this one is packing quite a bit of a punch. This is showing upwards to over 50 plus millimeters of rainfall. So this is slowly going to be continuing to migrating eastward and through areas like Windsor over western areas of Lake Erie as well. So lots of dynamics at play. We're going to continue to see this threat in terms of the storms Wednesday overnight into Thursday morning. We're continuing to see the threat for those supercells to push in along that boundary. So overnight storms, nocturnal storms are what we call them. Large hail, heavy rainfall, and strong gusty winds will continue to be some of the main threats as the storm complexes make its way in through areas of northwestern Ontario. So we are looking at the threat there as well. And through areas of Ontario for tomorrow, just wanted to highlight the potential of what we could be experiencing once it loads up on your screen. So areas in through northeastern Ontario, Kapuskasing, and in through areas of Quebec, looking at the threat to see severe storms scattered in nature. Once again, that same frontal boundary that's pushing in across the region, and that's what's going to be giving way to the continued threat for some storms for your Thursday in Ontario, Kim. Now, what's going on in portions in terms of the tornado warnings in Manitoba?
Yeah, I'm going to get to those. No changes. The warnings have ended in Broken Head and Springfield, which is good news. Lac du Bonnet, Pinois, Whitemouth, and Rural Municipality of Reynolds are all still in the tornado warning. I'm going to go to our storm hunter, Mark Robinson, who's in Colchester. He is on the shores of Lake Erie, an area that has seen significant damage. I can hear, I think, the chainsaws. Is that what's going on back there, Mark?
Yeah, Kim, it's always amazing to see when the cleanup begins, everybody comes out and gives a hand. I'm probably counting about 15 people that are all working away trying to get this cleaned up. I actually talked to them and warned them that, potentially within the next 30 minutes or so, that second line is going to make its way through here. Lots of lightning on that one. Which got me a little bit concerned. But at this point, it does look like it's weakening a bit. At least, that's my fingers crossed, because there is a ton of damage to clean up. Kim, I'm going to show you something right here. There's one of the branches right there. So that's just like one of probably the tens of thousands of branches and trees that are down in this area. So far, I haven't heard of any injuries, which is always good. But now begins the secondary. I'm going to say. Not trauma, but at least, people are sad because, some of these trees have been growing for 30, 40, 50, maybe even 100 years. And that's really sad and it's tough on people to see those trees removed. But that cleanup has to be done because, you've got trees down over cars, over top of buildings. I have seen a few trees into buildings, into houses so far. But at this point, I'm looking at it being a bit of a downburst. Of course, the Northern Tornadoes Project is going to come through and take a really close look and be able to determine whether or not this is downburst or whether or not it's tornadic. Either way, the damage has been done, and I've got my fingers crossed. This second line, you can actually see the sky behind me getting gray. That's not because it's becoming evening. That's actually because that next line is literally just down the road at this point. It's actually gotten into southern Ontario, and I'm going to go back down to the beach so I can get a good look at what's coming in.
Yeah, no warnings yet for the area, but it certainly does look like an eerie background for you there from my perspective too, Mark. And I know that those people are going to have to get out of the way if another storm comes through. That's Mark Robinson, our storm hunter. He's in Colchester on the shores of Lake Erie. And that's after the first round of storms rolled through a couple of hours ago. That's what it looks like now as it's headed over Lake Ontario. And behind it, again, another line of storms on the way. And they could potentially be severe, and obviously everybody wants to get out and clean up, pick up these branches, and we can see that it is full foliage. We've got lots of green leaves. We've had plenty of rain this summer so far across southern Ontario, mostly in the form of storms like this, and I can imagine the soil might be a little moist as well, which would make it easier, especially for smaller trees to become uprooted, but a lot of branches certainly snapped off in those very gusty winds, and it doesn't take long. That could have happened in a half an hour or less. A storm comes through, you have very little time to prepare. Hopefully you were prepared, you were heeding those watches earlier in the day and then the warnings as the storm came through. And again, some of those regions were under tornado warnings at the time. Even though it may not have been a tornado that caused that damage, it was a similar strength of wind. So whether it's rotating or a straight line wind, it's going to cause some serious damage. And it's unfortunate that people who want to clean up and get those roads clear so cars can go through may be dealing with another round sooner than later. And with that, I'm going to bring it over to meteorologist Melinda Singh, who's been looking closely at these storms as well.
Exactly, Kim. I just want to highlight the threat that we're now looking at these storms impacting areas. Like Mark said, the skies are so dark behind him, but they are slowly now making its way in through areas of extreme southwestern Ontario. The good news is the strongest winds are going to be pushing in right over the lake. That's this region right here. But areas like Amherstburg, Colchester could potentially be clipped and looking at more damaging winds as these storms continue to push eastward and across the region. Areas like Windsor will be looking at a bit more heavier rainfall across the region, but areas down to the south is where we're looking at the more heavier and stronger wind components. So we're going to continue to track these. We're also looking at a bit of a cluster here, just a smaller cluster, still impacting areas like Petrolia, just south of Watford. So we're looking at those storms there, and just some light rainfall for areas like Kitchener, Erin, Toronto, Vaughan, Brampton, looking at just some light rainfall across the region. And I'm still looking at this cluster, slow moving, impacting areas like Wyerton, Owen Sound, and potentially into the coming hour or so, 30 minutes, impacting areas as it comes on shore, areas like Parry Sound, down and through Midland, Barrie as well. So not only are we tracking these storms across Ontario, we're also looking at the storm cells for areas in through Manitoba where they are still tornado warned. Areas across the south, we're looking at these continuing to push through. Whitemount seems to be in the in the center of it, looking a bit more of that heavier rainfall, large hail threat as well. Elma also, and it's going to continue to push eastward. Places like Rennie, Decimal should be, if you are indoors already, get inside because things are going to be quite windy and heavy rainfalls on its way with the potential for the large damaging hail. For those areas across the north, these storms have made it over the lake, and they are still sustaining itself and giving way to a bit more heavier damaging winds and some heavy rainfall across those regions as well. So we are continuing to track them as they impact areas of eastern Manitoba and now in through areas of northwestern Ontario. So Kenora, seeing some light rainfall across the region, and we'll start to see a little bit more of these stronger, more heavier downpours, stronger winds impacting areas in through northwestern Ontario. So as we continue in through your Wednesday into the overnight hours, we're still going to be tracking these storms as they move along this frontal boundary, nocturnal storms. So even the potential for more severe storms in those areas highlighted in orange on your screen. Strong winds, large hail, heavy rainfall that'll continue in towards the overnight hours. And then for your Thursday, areas like Kapuskasing, Mattagami, Moosonee, northeastern sections of Ontario are looking at a threat to seeing more scattered storms. It's right along this same boundary, but areas across southwestern Ontario, southern Ontario, are going to be in the clear for a bit more drier weather for your Thursday, which is some good news. We've been seeing pop-up storms across the past couple of days, but shifting gears into areas of Atlantic Canada, even through Labrador, looking at a threat to see some non-severe scattered storms in and across the region as we head into your Thursday. So we're going to continue to monitor this threat into the coming hours for you as well. Now we'll head over to Kim. So what's going on across portions of southern Ontario?
Yeah, I want to show you the radar right now, but I also want to take a look back at some of the damage that was done. But there's that first line. It's racing over Lake Ontario now. Still parts of the GTA getting some pretty significant rain. It's moving into eastern areas. We can see it to the north. And then that second line of storms racing across Lake Erie. It's just going to clip the shores, the northern shore of Lake Erie. So places like Colchester, where we have Mark Robinson, will likely get hit again by these storms. And it's an area that is currently cleaning up after the first round of storms. Okay, this is the tornado warning. Again, has now ended. Some good news, has now ended for Lac du Bonnet and Pinawa, including Seven Sisters Falls. So tornado warnings are coming to an end in Manitoba. Not everywhere, though. Those storms are still pretty strong. The rural municipalities of Whitemouth, including Elma, and Reynolds, including St. Rita, and Haddishville and Rennie, are still under that tornado warning. The severe thunderstorm is located from St. Rita to Whitemouth, moving east at about 40 kilometers per hour towards Reynolds to Decimal. So those are the areas that are likely to be impacted next. And again, we've seen some massive hail with these storms. We're talking about hen egg sized hail that can do a lot of damage. Now let's take a look at a compilation of some storm damage for not only Ontario, but a little bit around the Manitoba area as well. So here's a look at the skies. This is in southwestern Ontario near Dresden. Mark Robinson out there in the middle of the storm and catching that. He had to pull over, obviously with the gusty winds and the heavy rainfall. This is at Long Point Provincial Park, popular spot on the shores of Erie. Nice shelf cloud there, and the winds kicked up pretty quickly after that. Winnipeg itself did not get a direct hit, but you can certainly see the storms in the distance from the city. Harrow, Ontario, yes, this is unfortunate when we get these big trees, these big old trees just snapping with the powerful winds that rolled through, likely straight line winds, and just unbelievable. Look at this concrete just pulled right up, trees down on vehicles on this big truck and down on roads as well. So yes, we've had some significant storm damage. I don't see a place name for those last few images. It could have been in the Harrow region and Colchester. I know they've been cleaning up there as well. Kingsville, you had a lot of damage too, all basically in southwestern Ontario, which was under a tornado warning. Does not mean that necessarily that is tornado damage. It could be a downburst, which is very similar in damage, but the winds are straight line winds. So everything kind of falls in one direction versus when, say, the Northern Tornado Project goes out to survey damage and they try to determine whether or not it was a tornado, first of all, and they can see that debris is scattered in a more circular motion as a tornado would go. And they also determine how strong the tornado was or the straight line winds based on the kind of damage done with those storms and with those winds. So that's how they make those predictions. And again, here's a look. Manitoba, still a couple of tornado warnings in place to the north and the south. These storms are just hanging on. They've been going for quite a while now. It's nice to see some of these warnings have come to an end, but again, you have to take these warnings seriously if you're in the alerts, because these storms are producing obviously powerful winds, some very large hail, lots of lightning on these storms, and heavy downpours as well, all things that you have to be concerned about. And we always talk about where you should be. If you're in a tornado warning, you want to get into the lowest level of your home. If you have a basement, that's ideal. If you don't have a basement, an interior room, that's where you want to go, away from windows. I believe, do we have Mark Robinson again? I see him there.
Kim,
there
can
you
you hear
go.
me okay?
I can hear you perfectly,
Okay.
but I hear some strong winds too.
Yeah, you're actually getting we're getting right on the edge of the inflow-outflow boundary. So you can see behind, well, you actually probably can't see even too well behind me. The edge of it is right there. That's the whole sort of second line right behind me. I'm down on the Colchester beach, and I didn't think I was going to need to use my lights, but I definitely have my lights on my camera at this point. But I'm going to step out just for a second and just see, and just let the camera sort of figure out and show you as best it can of what's coming towards me. I'm just starting to feel a little bit of rain now, and I can hear just this almost constant rumble of thunder. Even though I haven't seen a lot of flashes behind me, I can definitely hear it. That's the only indication that the storm behind me is relatively strong. Down on the beach here, going to be absolutely clean winds. The winds are just going to come screaming along here. This is also where we may see potential damage, but it does look like the strongest winds maybe just south of here, but I do not want to discount that there could be some strong winds along the lines towards a little bit further north, back up to where we already seen damage, like Harrow, like Colchester, Kingsville. All these different areas may see some damaging winds as this one comes through. A little hard to say because, again, can't really see much structure back there, so my fingers crossed that it's not going to be too bad, and it's just going to bring some rain and maybe some lightning and some light wind. But as I said, be prepared. This line is coming into southern Ontario now.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Stay safe out there. Oh my gosh, we're wrapping up our live stream. I know that Mark will continue to be on, what just happened? I'm thinking it was probably lightning. Mark will continue to be on social media as well, and we will continue to follow these storms both in Ontario and in Manitoba on our television station. So on the Weather Network, on TV, we will continue to be there through the evening. As long as we have severe weather, we will be here for you. And obviously, Weather Network is on social media. You can follow us there, especially on Twitter, or I guess it's X now, at the Weather Network. So here's a look at the next line of storms. This is what Mark is keeping an eye on as these storms move along the shores of Lake Erie. The other first line is moving across Lake Ontario. A lot of the more severe weather is stateside at this point, but we've had a few thunderstorms now just rolling across the Sarnia area, have now passed. Not many people have missed these particular storms. We've had rain and strong winds, even if not everybody has seen the worst of it. Melinda's been with me all evening following these storms. Melinda, what are your thoughts now? What are you thinking about this next round?
So it looks like, just like Mark was saying, that it's the majority of the stronger winds will be over the lake, very southern portions like Colchester, down through Port Pelee potentially, but we are going to continue to see a little bit more heavier rainfall across the Windsor area, but the most damaging winds will be over the lake, which is really some good news after seeing the damages from those regions, Kim. Now I do want to highlight going back to Manitoba, where the tornado warning for Blood Vein has now been decreased, but we are continuing to still see the tornado warning in effect for Whitemouth, the rural municipality of Whitemouth, including Elma, and the rural municipality of Reynolds. So this is the same storm structure that was just northeast of Winnipeg. It continues to make its way eastward, and that's what we're going to be continuing to track live for you on TV. And now it looks like it has expanded into decimal. So for those of you in that region, please, head indoors, stay away from the windows and glass doors, go to a basement, protect you and your loved ones. I'll quickly show the radar before we end our live coverage on our platform. We will be continuing our live coverage on TV, so make sure you are staying tuned. So once again, look at these purples on the screen, indicating a little bit of heavier rainfall, some hail indicating there, and now this area like Decimal, including Rennie, is now in the tornado warning. So a very large system. It's still sustaining itself. It is a supercell. We've been seeing pictures and comments online of how of a strong structure it is, so it's going to continue to make its way in through these areas into the next couple of minutes.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. Thank you for joining us on this live stream as we continue to follow these storms. Yes, tune in to television, the Weather Network, and of course, stay safe and have your alerts handy, and always pay attention to weather warnings.